You're listening to WCGO Radio 1590 AM Chicago. I'm speaking with Bruce Connor. Bruce is a world-class speed skater, and he's an athlete of distinction in a lot of ways. We've been talking about his early training and his early speed skating, and then a hiatus, a long period in his life where he just kind of put that on the shelf, and that competitive spirit was ultimately reawakened, and to the point where Bruce, you started training again. You started trying to get that feeling back again, and it was for fun, but you still had the skills and the that training mindset, that competitive athlete mindset. What was it that kind of took you to the next level to say, okay, I want to compete again. I want to compete on the world stage?
Mm-hmm. What happened was I had run into an old friend of mine up in Calgary in 1988, 1 month before the Olympic Games. And I hadn't even touched my skates at that point for 12 years. And I brought him with me on a trip. I got assigned a trip up to Calgary, and I happened to run into Nancy Swider-Peltz, who lives in Wheaton. And she made 8 Olympic trials, 4 Olympic teams, 2 world records, all while having 3 children. And is an dear old friend of mine as well. And we started out speed skating together when we were 12 years old as part of the original founders of the Park Ridge Speed Skating Club. Her, yeah. So I ran into her in Calgary, and they wouldn't let me on the ice. But she said, no, you're with us. You're with us. You're a former national team member. You can come with us. And so I was able to skate again. I was skate in Calgary at the first ever indoor 400-meter oval. Okay. Here's where it was perfect ice. 60 degrees, a little bit of a tailwind all the time because people stirred up a little bit of a tailwind going around the oval. Okay. And I'm like, this is Mecca. If this is the future of speed skating, I got to figure out a way to get back here. Right. And I did. Now, it was just a seed that was planted. It had to kind of germinate for a while. I had a young son at the time, and I just started my career with United Airlines and fairly new marriage and all that stuff. And so I had to kind of let things kind of percolate for a while. And so I ran 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons, a few triathlons here and there. And I was in the middle of the pack. And I thought when I was about 40, so it was a few years after that, almost 10 years after that, they had built the rink in Milwaukee inside as well. So I'm like, wow. Here's
similar conditions as to what you knew that, hey, maybe I can expect that experience when I get back to Milwaukee. And it's only
75 miles away from me. Right. So, it's not halfway across the country. It's actually accessible. I can go up there and skate and come back in the same day without too much trouble. And I thought, well, maybe I should go back and try this again and see where we go with this. And I was skating pretty well. And I bought some new skates, and I went to Calgary for a competition and skated faster than I did when I was 19. Wow. And I'm like, wait a minute, what's really going on here? And I was only skating once a week and just kind of training on the side. Mm-hmm. And so I was kind of making friends with a guy in Milwaukee. His name is Dave Cruikshank, who's from Northbrook. He's a 3-time Olympian, world junior champion, sprint champion at one time, world junior record holder at one time. His wife is Bonnie Blair. Okay. And he had a coaching facility right there at the Pettit Center in Milwaukee. And I thought, well, what would he think about this? And I had kind of been friends with him for a little while, been skating around with him, and he was helping another guy try to make it to the Olympic team who was 36 years old, who was a little bit on the outside, but, and only been on speed skates for a couple of years. He was a great hockey player and decided to try speed skating. And I said, could I join your group and train with you guys? And he said, absolutely. And so I hired him. And so I hired a coach, which was very different for me. Right. You were doing it on your own. I'm willing to say, I don't know. Yeah. Can I do this differently? And so I approached it from a completely different mindset. And I said, okay, teach me. I can build a motor, but you got to teach me how to skate differently so I can go faster. Mm-hmm. And he did. And so the goal was to make it back to the Olympic trials. I wasn't going to be good enough to be on the team, but I was going to make it back to the Olympic trials. And so I would still have to skate faster than I ever skated in my life. I'd have to continually improve. And I had about 8 months to make that qualifying time, and I did it.
And when were the Olympic trials? So what were you shooting for?
That was December of 2005. Okay. And that was for the 2006 Olympics that were in Turin, Italy. Torino. Okay. And so I made it I made it to the Olympic trials, and there was a nice, the Today Show did a 5-minute spot on me. They
But
did
that's
a
on your
follow-up
website,
thing.
right?
It's on my website. It was, and the next day they did a 1.5-minute follow-up on me because of my second race and stuff. And I was skating faster than I ever skated in my life, and it wasn't even close.
Wow.
And it was fun, and I was having a great time. And a lot of that had to do with trying to figure out and being able to look myself in the mirror and say, am I good enough? And growing up with an Olympic champion, in the family, that was really important for me to do. And so I was able to finally look myself in the mirror and say, yes, I am good enough.
Well, and that's a completely different mindset. You mentioned that you were having a great time, and there's a freedom to that.
Yes.
There's a freedom that comes out when you do something for fun, for the joy of it.
Absolutely. No pressure. I'm not trying to knock anybody off a team spot or anything.
Right.
I'm just trying to be part of that group, that elite group. And I was having a great time doing it, enjoying the process. I was falling down a few times. I'd make a few mistakes here and there, and I had to relearn how to race again because there's a whole different mindset. When you bring your ego and your emotions to the racing line, there's nothing, you could train for that, but you can't duplicate a race. And that was really important for me to learn how to do that. And Dave Cruikshank really helped me get there. And then I did it again. I did it again at age 53. Then I did it again a year and a half ago at age 57. Nobody's even come close to doing that before.
Right.
And as a master speed skater, yes, I'm faster than any other masters. In fact, I'm usually faster than the younger age groups as well. So it's been fun. And yes, like I said, I've fallen down a few times. I've had a couple of knee injuries. I've had some overtraining issues again, believe it or not. But I've tried to figure out how to balance this stuff out.
Right.
None of us are perfect, but if we can keep striving for excellence and try to be a little better today than I was yesterday, then I can do this.
And in your book, you not only, there are some chapters about, where you're going through general principles of training and injuries and prevention and reevaluating a plan when it's, you got to make adjustments. But there's also so much more of the mental stuff and the emotional stuff and the things that eventually, if we focus on them in the right way, we can change as people for the better.
Absolutely.
And it's not all about, okay, how do I ride my bike faster? How do I run this next 10K faster? It's about perspective.
Yeah.
And there's so much that you've taken from your journey that you put into your book.
Thank you. I had a dear friend of mine that I reconnected with that I went to high school with, and he was a great hurdler, and we ran cross country and track together, and he helped me with this. He said, you got to add more stories to this when I first started looking at this, and I started to add more stories to it to illustrate my points. It was pretty antiseptic at the beginning, but it took me 4.5 years to get to this point when I finally figured out that it was important for me to tell my story. Not only tell my story, but show people that these principles are possible. Right. And we have way more capability than we give ourselves credit. And we can achieve almost anything. And these are universal principles. It doesn't apply to sports. It applies to anything that you want to. And it's not even necessarily about achievement. It's also about the journey as well. So the book is essentially divided into 3 parts. The first part is building a case for what I've done, which is the speed skating, avenue. And that's very a tangible part of the evidence. And the middle part is about how to break down those barriers of the self-limiting beliefs, about being told that we usually get slower as we get older. Sorry, I'm living proof that's not true.
Right.
And so once I can break down those kinds of barriers, I'm sure that you've probably had some of those similar barriers in your life that you've broken down. Right.
And things that, you kind of look at your life, you go, oh, you know what? I can't do that anymore. And actually, that did happen for me. There was a gymnastics training center in Barrington, and I just kind of stuck my head in there one day. And, it turns out that a friend of mine, a guy I competed against in high school and college, was running the gym. And we kind of looked at each other like, who are you? I know you. And then, then there was the happy reunion, and I started coaching there again. Well, when you're in a gym, you just can't help but, get on the equipment and start doing the stuff.
It feeds you, so you need to feed that need in yourself.
Right,
yes.
right. And like you said, I knew immediately. I went, okay, you know what? I'm easily 15 pounds heavier than when I was competing, and I feel like it. You know, I'm bending the parallel bars a little more, and
Right.
and bending the high bar a little bit more, but the joy was still there, you know, and the desire to do it. I had a lot of injuries early on. I was very reckless in my college.
When we're young,
career.
we're immortal, aren't we?
Right. You know, a stretched tendon here and a sprained knee and shoulders, and so they all started catching up to me. But I still was involved in something that I loved, and that feeds the soul.
Right. It does. It does. And then the third part of the book really deals with the tools to get the job done. And I've broken down this into a number of different parts. The first essential part is building a network for support. And that comes from parents and grandparents. It comes from childhood and adolescence. There's different things there as well. And then as an adult, there's a different support network for adults as well. I have a wife now. I have my boss at work has to support me in being able to take time off and those kinds of things. Those are important. Then I have to be able to figure out how to set goals and how to set them appropriately and how to be able to change them and how to have them be meaningful to me. They have to be time sensitive, and they have to be specific. And so I talk a lot about those kinds of things and how I've had to change my goals over time as well. Ego and emotion is very important. You know, how am I bringing my ego into all of this training? Is my identity tied up in
way,
my exactly healthy or unhealthy way? Exactly. And how do I draw from my emotions? You know, in the beginning of a sprint race, I'd be very calm. But at the end, I have to draw from really deep down in order to get the strength that I need to do in order to be able to finish the race well.
Right.
Nutrition is important. Bringing my A game is really important because I train very intensely. And so it's important to be able to raise that intensity as I go. And how do you do that? It takes practice.
Right.
Coaching and the coach-athlete relationship. I write a whole chapter on that and how important that is.
You had experience with no coaching, and not just bad coaching, but no coaching.
Right.
Or
coaching myself, which was even worse.
Right.
And now I've had relationships with two phenomenal coaches that came along at the right time for me, and they just worked out perfectly. But I also had to spend a lot of energy making sure that I fostered those relationships.
Right.
You know, I remember walking in one time to a physical therapist. I had a heel issue that was going on at the time, and this physical therapist, I kind of developed a little bit of a rapport with her, and I walked in, she said, "You're tired. What's going on?" And I'm like, "Really?" She said, "Yeah, you're wearing it on the outside." I'm like, "Really?" And I said, evidently I had an open enough relationship with her that she could be frank with me and say, "Hey, what's really going on here?"
Right.
And it hit me in the face that I didn't realize that I had actually developed that relationship to that point. And that's really important in those kinds of situations, that we have good feedback,
right?
That we foster that and welcome it. And because if we don't, it's like never being able to look in a mirror.
Right.
You know, it's really hard
you need other people to reflect
absolutely
back on.
And then there's a lot of things I talk about. There's 3 sections on training. We have general training principles, you know, what I do basically. Then injuries and prevention. Injuries are really important in terms of being able to be in the sport for any longevity,
right?
You know, as a master's athlete. And then reevaluating the plan. I've had a number of times where I've had to reevaluate because I tore my meniscus again, you know, and I had to take a month off, you know, right in the middle of trying to qualify for the Olympic trials. That was really tough for me once, but I realized that I needed the rest.
Right.
There was a silver lining to all that.
Yeah.
Competition. Competition is really important, how we gauge ourselves and how we approach that stuff. Not only just in physical competition in a race, but how do we compete with ourselves? You know, that's really important as well. Balance and priorities. You know, literally I'm balanced on a 1.1 millimeter blade, but also have to balance all the priorities in my life. And that's really important.
Sure.
And then mental support, I talk about that a lot. And then having courage. And courage I always thought was a big thing, you know, and doing big things. No, courage is taking the next step today.
Right.
That's all it really is. And then looking up after a while and going, wow, I've come a long way. It's pretty cool.
Well, that is great stuff all across the board. You know, thank you very much for coming in with us, Bruce. The name of your book?
Faster as a Master. And it's breaking down barriers, journeying toward wholeness.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is being a whole person at the end of this or during this process.
Sure. And how can we find it? How can we find you?
You can find me at Bruce W. Conner, that's spelled CONNER.com. I have a website. You can order my book directly through there. In fact, if you order it through there, you could put a little note in there as to how you want it to be inscribed. I'm glad to inscribe it however you want and mail it personally to you. It's $12.95 plus tax plus shipping. I think it's about $18 for domestic.
Terrific. Well, thanks very much for coming in, Bruce.
Thank you very much, Scott.
Steady, I just drop my head into